Thank you for joining us on Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja and we're coming to you from the Garden City residences. Now, according to the National AIDS Control Council, it says that despite the HIV prevalence rate in the country decreasing, it's still the #1 cause of death amongst the adolescents. Today, we try answer the question why and also if disclosure or lack of it has anything to do with the increasing number of HIV new infections amongst the youth. But before we get to it, here now is a fact of the matter. Human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, is a virus that attacks the immune system, our body's natural defense against illness. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, is a set of symptoms and illness that happen at the final stage of HIV infection if left untreated. HIV is found in semen, blood, vaginal and anal fluids, and also breast milk. Using condoms during sex is the best way to prevent HIV and other sexually transmitted infections. If you inject drugs, always use a clean needle and syringe and never share equipment. Taking antiretrovirals and suppressing your viral load eliminates the risk of mother-to-child transmission. People with HIV can enjoy a long and healthy life by taking antiretroviral treatment, which is effective and available to all. Regular testing for HIV is important to know your status, and also disclosing your HIV status lessens the chances of getting or transmitting HIV.
My name is Feni Awiti and I am 27 years old. I'm a mother of 2 girls, and something so unique about myself is that I'm HIV positive and my baby is a HIV negative. I discovered my status in Form 2 in high school, and there's this organization that came. I was tested and then the results were double line. That means I was positive as per what the counselor told me about the results. The way the double line is positive, single line is negative. I felt discriminated, and I had to go back and tell my teachers, my counseling teachers in school, and my counseling teachers called one of my siblings who came and told me that I actually got infected from birth. So I remember what happened to me in dealing with denial or acceptance rather is that I became so resistant in school and I could not study at all, and it's really reflected on my grades. I had a C- after high school. Of course, I wish I knew my HIV status earlier on, because I was at that point when I was finding out I'm positive, because I used to be so sickly. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I used to have all these opportunistic infections, you name them, tuberculosis, meningitis, everything. I used to have mumps. And by the time I was actually put on medication, I had about 110 CD4 counts. That is so low. A normal person should have above 350. I was in the AIDS stage. I definitely breastfed my kids because I had undetectable viral load. So then I breastfed my kids normally for the first 6 months exclusive, and then after that I introduced mixed feeding up to 1.5 years, 2 years. Yeah, it was so normal. I have a challenge with how people are normalizing HIV. They've taken it so easy and simple to a point of they fear. For us females, we fear even getting pregnant more than getting HIV. I've been on ARVs for now 11 years. If you're HIV positive, love yourself, take your medicine, eat well and all that. Take good care of yourself. It's not really a must. You don't owe anyone disclosure, you know. But then if you really have to disclose your status, you have to know that there are so many repercussions that come when you publicly disclose your HIV status. Yes.
According to the National AIDS Control Council, HIV continues to be the #1 leading killer amongst adolescents. Today, we try to figure out why are we seeing increasing numbers of new infections amongst the youth. And to help us delve into that conversation, Dr. Griffin Manguro, who is Office Director, International Center for Reproductive Health, Kimutai Kemboi, who is living positively with HIV, and he's also a HIV disclosure ambassador. Thank you for making time, gentlemen. And just to start with, the fact that the numbers seem to be pushing up every day. Dr. Manguro, what do you think is the issue?
So if you look at the current numbers in terms of HIV infection, we have more young people getting infected every day compared to adults. The good thing is that the total infections among adults is still higher than the total infections among young people. But most of it is because we generally have a generation that really isn't well equipped to help prevent themselves against HIV.
Kemboi, I'll come to you. You've been living positively with HIV for a while now, but you are a victim of being in a relationship with somebody who did not disclose their status. Tell us more about that.
Okay, it happened that I was in a crossroad, in a situation whereby I was really desperate. And it happened that I ended up being in a relationship with her it was not my will, but it was what I was going through that forced me into it. Yeah.
And by the time you were finding out you were HIV positive, what had transpired in between?
I was not having any illness, but it just happened that I should know my HIV status. And to my surprise, I just realized that I've been living with HIV.
So when you came back to ask the lady if she was HIV positive, was she open to telling you the truth?
Okay, it was unfortunate that I came to learn about my status after she was deceased by then. So I never came to meet her. I never had a word with her. Dr.
Manguro, what Kemboi brings to the fore clearly points at what we're calling nowadays sponsor syndrome, where the young are living a very risky life because they want opportunities and many other reasons.
Yeah, well, a lot of the new infections are actually out of intergenerational sex. That is sex between, and it could be either way. It could be in older men, younger women. It could be younger men, older women. But also associated or related to that is the fact that many young people have sort of what I call a lower perception of their risk of HIV. Especially among young ladies, there's usually a generally bigger fear of pregnancy compared to HIV. And it's because many young people don't feel as vulnerable of HIV as the older people.
How long did it take you before you disclosed your status to probably your loved ones, your friends?
Initially, after I learned that I'm living with HIV, it was hard for me to believe, because after that I went to different other clinics for a test, and the results was still the same, that I was living with HIV. But it was really hard for me. So I stayed for close to a year before accepting that, yes, it's true, I'm living with HIV. So it was really a very tough journey. But eventually I came to accept myself, and then from there now, I was enrolled to medication, and from there, my life has been smooth.
There's also the issue that disclosure is not being seen to walk hand in hand with knowing your status. How does that play to the increasing numbers?
One of the things we found out recently is that it's very hard for young people to get tested and to know their status in the first place, because many of the services and many of the VCT services, testing services that we have available, many of them don't have services that are tailored towards young people. And so not that many young people are encouraged or get encouraged to test themselves. And so you'll find that HIV testing rate, or the people who know their status, we have more adults, especially adult women, who know their status compared to young people. A lot of whether or not you'll disclose will depend on the post-test counseling you receive. And that's one of the things that, especially as clinical service providers, we would need to really work on, to be able to provide services that are good enough to encourage disclosure among young people.
Why did you decide to be a HIV disclosure ambassador, Kemboi?
The big reason for that is is what I went through, because it was really hard for me, like, to interact with people, to interact with my friends, and at times there was a discussion that just spontaneously arises from nowhere, and you hear them discussing about someone, how he looks like, nowadays he's growing thin, it looks like he's ailing. Then it was really hurting me, because I feel like this thing will progress to an extent that I'll be the one who they will be discussing about. So I said, before it reaches there, let me just try and bar that from progressing. And then also another thing is my drug adherence was really being interfered with, because when they are around, I would skip. I will not take my drug. So I decided maybe if I disclose, I'll be having that peace of accessing my drugs on time, and I don't fail.
And what was the reception after you came out?
Before I disclosed, I was prepared either to be accepted or to be rejected, and then and to my surprise, I was accepted. Nobody rejected me at any point.
So 60% of new infections are actually amongst adolescent girls. So what is a connection between early pregnancies and the increase of new HIV infections? We continue this conversation right after this break. Thank you for staying with Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja. The focus today is trying to debunk why there is an increase of HIV new infections amongst the youth. Before we went to break, Kimutai, I alluded to the fact that there seems to be an increase of early pregnancies amongst the adolescents, and of course the increase of new HIV infections. We've had this before, that the young people are more afraid of getting pregnant than they are afraid of getting or contracting the virus. Is that the case, and why?
I think also it's about the information. Like, they don't have adequate information about the risk of being HIV, the risk of having pregnancy. And the fact that a pregnancy, it does not it take long for it maybe to be seen. But for HIV, you might live with it without anybody knowing about it.
Is it that the youth are not properly empowered to probably use available prevention methods, either for pregnancy or for HIV?
I think as youth in general, there's always a tendency to push it. And there's always a tendency to believe that you can do some things and get away with them. Principally also because you don't really have the experience of having, having been burnt before. There's no precedence before. So there are many things that young people are likely to get into simply because they are young. That said, now it comes down to what interventions do we put in place. And this is where it's important to know that the interventions that we design or should be designed for young people should be a bit different from the interventions that we design for older people, and it should take into accountability the fact that the youth are at a higher risk because they are likely to take more risks with their lives. So in terms of the communication, it's not just about the content of the communication, but it's about what other avenues do you put it? Instead of having it on TV, is it possible to have it on YouTube and Facebook and WhatsApp? Now,
Kemboi, even as we speak to the young people, do they probably put it out there? It would help if they saw more aggressive campaigns, because earlier on there was a lot of it. That seems to have reduced with time.
Earlier, there was that information was easily accessible, unlike now. So that means a lot has to be put in place so that this youth can be able to access that information very easily, and also in like a friendly way.
Okay, now back to you, Dr. Manguro. Why don't we have these messages in our faces anymore?
In 2018, there were about 52,000 new HIV infections. About 5 years ago, the number of new infections was about twice that. It was about 100,000 new infections. So of course, there's a way that the society and as a country we have dealt with HIV, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think as a result of this success, we've sort of scaled down in terms of our communication and our prevention messaging and so on. So part of it has been because we've seen some fair amount of success over the last maybe 5 or so years. But the second reason is also because we've scaled up access to antiretroviral treatment. So a lot of the current focus has not been on prevention, has not been on communication. A lot of the current focus has been on getting people tested, and those who get test positive, start them on antiretroviral treatment, because that in itself is a way of prevention against HIV. A third reason would be because maybe right now communication is different. We have different channels of communication, we have different priorities as a society. And as a result of that, the communication has changed a bit more.
But looking at the numbers, clearly a little
Yes.
more priority needs to be given.
Yes,
Yeah.
more priority needs to be given, but the priority also needs to be given in terms of what messages are more effective among young people.
And speaking of which, we have one on set. Kibutai, what do you think?
Because most of these youth are in school. So I think is such this learning institution should bring into place like awareness, whereby they can set like some specific days or events whereby they create awareness, not only in the school, but also they get other people from outside who are like experts on that, or even people living with HIV, because it's always good to share from a live experience. It's like it is driving that message directly to who we want that message to get to.
Dr. Manguro, even as we say there needs to be more awareness amongst the youth, there is a misuse of PrEP. So how now do we ensure that they understand that despite using this, there's still a risk factor?
One thing, PrEP is one of the most effective methods of HIV prevention. I think the big challenge is when the youth are not really informed enough about PrEP, because ideally PrEP should be taken continuously. You take it every single day for as long as you are at high risk of acquiring HIV. What many youth today do is they take it like morning after pills. You take it the day before, the day after. And that in itself makes it very difficult makes it ineffective. And in case they get HIV, there's a risk of resistance to those drugs that are used for PrEP. So the most important thing there would be to provide adequate and accurate information to these young people at the point of getting PrEP. When they are getting PrEP, they need to be thoroughly counseled, and the person or the clinician who's providing PrEP needs to really do a thorough assessment to see whether they understand what it is and whether they are likely to be adherent to the PrEP and to take it as prescribed. And if they are not, then there are other better mechanisms for preventing HIV than PrEP.
How much more should disclosure be done, and how much would it help in the fight against HIV, and especially amongst the youth?
The big thing nowadays is not the issue of HIV, but it's about discrimination, whereby discrimination has been a disease on its own. And I feel that a disclosure is actually a way of averting that discrimination. I feel that after you have disclosed about your status, it's like you get that peace. As you feel free. It's like it was a load on you, then now you have that relief. Though disclosure is not a one-day thing that you just wake up and decide and say, I'm going open. No, it's a process. And before you actually disclose, you have to wait. Like, how will I go about it if I'm rejected, rejected, or if I'm accepted? You just be prepared about the two options, because it can go either way.
So Dr. Manguro, what should policymakers put as priority to ensure that there's more sensitization to this group of people, and also ensure they understand the dangers of HIV and AIDS?
The first thing we would need to do is to provide accurate and age-appropriate information. And age-appropriate in the sense that you don't lie to the young people and you just tell the truth. I mean, I think it's okay to say, if you were to have sex, use a condom, other than there are many things we do as a society that mystify sex and that make it possible or easy, or that would encourage young people to have unprotected sex. And so one of the things we would need to do to sort that out is just demystify the whole sexual experience. Second thing would be to provide youth-friendly services, and this is very important. It means young people hate to line up for services. Young people hate to get services from somebody who doesn't understand them. So either set up centers that specifically provide services to young people, or integrate good quality youth centers within the existing services. That means, for example, at Kenyatta Hospital, for example, have a youth place where you have a doctor, nurse trained in counseling and in providing youth-friendly services, and have that marked as a youth-friendly center, and encourage young people to go there and receive the kind of services that they require. And the third thing is also generally to have a guideline in terms of communication, both at home and at school, that again provides accurate information. Because as it is right now, many people who want to provide information and to provide knowledge to the youth are walking in the dark. They're essentially giving their opinion, and it's not necessarily the right thing. So what we need is a very clear framework of how, at all levels, as parents, teachers, peers, we can engage the youth to fight HIV. I think those three would be fairly effective.
That has been Dr. Griffin Manguro, who is the Office Director, International Center for Reproductive Health, Kimutai Kimboy, who is living positively with HIV and also very passionate about being a HIV disclosure ambassador. The conversation around how these numbers we are seeing of new infections amongst the youth can be reduced, and those answers have been given, and all stakeholders need to pull their weight to make this a possibility. Well, time for the health tip.
If you have HIV, you need a lot more vitamin C. Now, yes, it's true, vitamin C is in fruits, it's in oranges, and so on. It's good. Moringa also is a good plant for vitamin C. Strawberries are fantastically high. Greens like broccoli is very high. All these foods are good. Vitamin C is important. Zinc is important. Zinc is a mineral that boosts the immune system. It's in seeds. So eating seeds is a very important way to boost the immune system. Selenium is a mineral that also boosts the immune system. And selenium is in anything that begins with SE. It's in seafood, it's in seaweed, it's in simsim seeds, sesame seeds. So again, seeds, nuts, seafood, all of these help to boost the immune system.
That has been Health Diary this week. Please, if you have any suggestions, any comments, you can reach us on our social media handles. My name is Gladys Gashanja, and we have been coming to you from the Garden City Residences. Until next time, see you. Relax kabisa. Nini unachungulia? Wewe producer? Oh, wacha kufanya hivyo, unani distract.